Hi, I'm Sage Trussler here for City Talk, and today we're interviewing Vice Admiral Jeffrey Trussler.
We have the same last name. Why is that?
I'm not quite sure.
You don't want to tell everybody that you're actually my niece?
I think I think it's pretty out there.
Okay.
So, when did you go to Miami High School?
Oh yes, I grew up in Mima, just like you all have. I graduated in 1981, so that's a long time ago. Your father graduated in '86. Your grandfather and my dad, 1958, and my grandfather, whom you never met, he graduated in '38. So we're a war dog family. We bleed war dog blue.
When did you join the Navy?
I joined the Navy in 1984 when I was a junior at Oklahoma State University. I joined a program to go in and learn about nuclear propulsion and submarines. And I thought I was going in just for more education, which I enjoyed being an engineering student. And little did I know I was going to learn to drive submarines and shoot torpedoes and shoot missiles and travel around the world. So I joined in 1984, and I stayed in the Navy for 39 years, retiring about 18 months ago in 2023. And you were at my retirement.
I was, in fact. So, what made you want to join the Navy?
Well, I thought it was kind of interesting. At Oklahoma State, as a mechanical engineering student, in general, lots of folks went to get jobs at some of the oil companies in Oklahoma, maybe the Boeing plant up in Wichita, maybe General Dynamics down in Dallas. Those were the career fairs that were going on at the time. A recruiter sent a letter to me, and how would you like to earn more money while still attending college? Would you like more information? And I just check, more information. Anyway, so through the process, I realized I could get some continued education and see a little bit of an adventure by joining the Navy. It took me a while to figure out that I wanted to actually do that. I was a little nervous because I had never seen the ocean. I had never flown on a plane until I did that for the Navy to go off for my initial training.
So, I know you were on submarines, but where did you live when you were in the Navy?
Ooh, I lived all over. I did initial training up in Newport, Rhode Island at Officer Candidate School. I did some nuclear power training for a year of training, 6 months in Orlando, Florida, where Disney World is, 6 months up in Idaho Falls, Idaho for some hands-on training at an actual power plant, back up to Groton, Connecticut for submarine training. So I had almost 2 years of training before I went to my first submarine. And that submarine was stationed in Hawaii, in Oahu. And from there, I did 4 separate assignments and tours in Hawaii for a total of 9 years. I did 2 tours down in Kings Bay, Georgia, that's southeast Georgia. 2 tours in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis, what's the Navy doing in Memphis? There's a personnel organization there that I was part of for a couple of times. I've lived in Naples, Italy. And then my last 14 years were in Washington, D.C., stationed at the Pentagon before I retired.
So, what was your favorite place in the Navy?
That's a hard question to answer because I did 4 different assignments in Hawaii for a total of 9 years. So living in Hawaii was great. I got to see all of the Hawaiian Islands, got to go to the beach whenever I wanted. I got to live in Naples, Italy for 2 years. That was fantastic because I got to travel all around Europe and see lots of Europe and even Africa from that visit. And so I would have to say those 2 were the most interesting places to live. It was interesting living in Memphis, Tennessee, next to the Mississippi River. Very interesting culturally there as part of America, and it was only a 7-hour drive from home, so I could come home and see my mom and dad long before you were born.
Okay. So, what is it like on a submarine?
A submarine. You know how big a submarine is?
I've been in one, but I don't remember it.
You have. You got to tour a submarine at one of my events. Submarines are the smallest submarines are 360 feet long. They will stick out both ends of the football stadium if you tried to lay one on there. So they're longer than a football stadium. There are 3 levels inside of our smaller submarines. Our bigger submarines are 560 feet long, almost 2 football fields. There are 4 levels inside. They're big, but they are jam-packed. Not all the room like we have all this room in here. Everything is taken up by space. So it is tight quarters. When we pass each other in a hallway, we have to, turn to the side a little bit. We're not just going to stroll side by side with plenty of room. They're pretty tight. Sleeping quarters, sometimes most places, the sleeping bunks are 3 tiers high. Okay? And the space in that bunk is about this high. So you can crawl in and you can sleep. You're not going to be able to sit up and read in those bunks. You're going to bonk your head. If you wake up from a bad dream, you might bonk your head. Now, some submarines, there's more crew than there are bunks. How do we do that? So sometimes we make bunks down in the torpedo room, and some couple of folks will sleep next to a torpedo, right next to a torpedo. We do something called hot racking sometimes. So what does that mean? It means if you're working, if you're standing a watch, driving the submarine, or doing maintenance, I'm sleeping. If we're hot rack mates, then when you're done with your shift, I get up and I'll go on a shift, and then you get to use the bunk to sleep. And if you crawl in there, it may be a little warm still because I was there. So that's why we call it hot racking. We call our bunks racks. A submarine goes 24/7, around the clock. We don't just ever turn off and everybody goes to sleep or goes home. It is 24/7. So somebody is always driving the ship, keeping the ship safe, making sure we're navigating properly so we don't hit anything, taking care of the engine room. Very complex. So there's, at any given time, it's about 20, 22 people that it takes to operate the submarine. Around 6-hour watches or 8-hour watches, just constantly going. And you go eat before you go on watch, and you go eat after you go on watch. And if you're a real glutton, you may get up after you sleep and go get another meal in there. So we serve 4 meals a day on there. So it's a fascinating environment. We're always busy. We're always training. We're always practicing how to respond to a fire. We're always practicing how to respond if there's a flooding on the ship. We're always practicing how to shoot torpedoes, how to shoot missiles. What do we do if somebody shoots a torpedo at us? We're constantly training if we're not out there doing our submarine missions.
Well, that was all the questions I had. Does anyone else have any questions?
What are the names of the submarines that you have been on?
Oh, a great question from the studio audience. Asked what were the names of the submarines I've been on. My first submarine was the USS Honolulu. And I was stationed in Hawaii, so the submarine named Honolulu was in Hawaii. I joined it in 1987, and it was deployed to Southeast Asia. So I flew to Hawaii, and my submarine wasn't there. I had to get on another plane and fly to Manila in the Philippines and join my submarine there. And so from there, got to go to Singapore, Hong Kong, Yokosuka, Japan, Guam, a lot of great places. My second submarine was the USS Tennessee, one of those big ones, 560 feet long, located in Kings Bay, Georgia. My third submarine, I was the executive officer, the number 2 on board, back in Hawaii, so that's how I got to go back to Hawaii a couple of times. And then my fourth submarine was the USS Maryland, and I was the captain of the USS Maryland for 3 years, and that was down in Kings Bay, Georgia. Now, submarines are now named after cities and states most of the time. Back in World War II, they used to be named after fish. So, for example, down in Muskogee, there's an old World War II submarine, one of the most famous World War II submarines there was. It's sitting out in a field in Muskogee. It was a memorial sitting up on blocks, but the field flooded and it lifted it off, and now it's sitting on a field. They're working to rectify that. But when Admiral Rickover was asked one day, he was the father of the Navy nuclear propulsion program, why we don't name submarines after fish anymore, and he said, submarines don't vote. So kind of a seasoned political answer back then. Any other questions from the studio audience?
If you had enough time for free time, what did you guys do on the submarine?
Oh, wow, what a great question. So back on my first submarine, the USS Honolulu, so this is in the late 80s, after your watch, after your shift, you would get a meal, and then you would do what we call after watch cleanup. That's where we have to keep the ship spick and span. So for about a half an hour to 45 minutes, those fellows that just came off watch, did ship cleaning. And then we did maintenance. And then we had some free time, and in the crew's mess, an area smaller than this, so a group of 20 to 30 people would gather, an area smaller than this, and we'd show movies. So that was on the plan of the day, the schedule of the day, that was a big deal. When is the afternoon and evening movies, and the midnight movie, the midwatch movie. And back then we used 16 millimeter reels. If you've ever seen them on TV, those reels that they have to snake in and watch the movie. We transitioned into VHS and Betamax. So if you probably never even used VHS tapes before, that was a big advancement. Back when I was a young man, that you could use VHS tapes to record things and to watch movies. But the Navy chose the Betamax version, so which did not take off, and you've probably never even heard of that. Now, so that's what a lot of people did: watch movies, read, and music. By the time I got to the USS Maryland and was a CO, so 15 to 20 years later, people had their own DVD machines and their own computers. So we would still show movies, and we could show a lot more now because of the digital media. But even if you didn't want to, you could lay in your rack and just watch a movie or listen to music on your own thing or read. Some people will also take college courses. As the Navy and most of the military has programs where you can take college courses while you're at sea or while you're doing your military assignments. And so a lot of people will work on those courses to get college credits even while they're at sea.
What was the scariest experience you had on a submarine?
The scariest experience I've had on a submarine? That's a really interesting question. So submarines stay underwater. We stay hidden. And because we can do that, we go to some pretty interesting places. And our job is to just snoop around and see what's going on in places of the world that maybe our ships or aircraft can't view. Nowadays, satellites can see a lot of things, but there are still some things in some places that only a submarine can get to, that we can kind of pay attention to what's going on and what maybe potential adversaries in the future are doing. So there have been some pretty tight moments where we have found ourselves in the presence of a foreign submarine. Back in the Cold War, U.S. submarines used to keep track of where Soviet submarines were. A lot of that type of work still goes on today, but sometimes you can get a little too close, and that's a little scary. Did they hear us or not? Did they see us or not? Do they know we're here? There's a little of that. And then sometimes there's the scary moments of just nature and the weather. The first time I was bringing the USS Maryland back into port, once you get to a certain place, you can't be underwater anymore because it's too shallow, so you've got to surface. And the weather was really bad as we're pushing into port. Very bad. The worst I've been in on a submarine on the surface. And we were taking 20 to 30 degree rolls in that submarine. So most ships have a hull shaped, like this. Submarines are a big round soup can almost. They're not as well configured to be on the surface, so they tend to roll a lot. And for about 6 hours as we were transiting inbound, we were up and down and rocking and rolling 20 to 30 degrees. Most of the crew was very sick. And it's just a few folks. We had to change the shifts in the watch section around for the folks who were still standing so that we could get the ship safely into port. And believe me, I'm the most motion sick man in the world. But man, I was scared that day because that's my first trip into port in command. So the adrenaline kept me from being sick as we were focused on that till we finally got to some calmer waters near land. So lots of interesting experiences like that.
Thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me, Sage. Am I picking you up from school today?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. A real privilege to be here back in War Dog country and see the old haunt. So thank you very much.